Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneur's Inner Game podcast. It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm very excited to have Nancy Zare. Nancy and I have known each other for a while. She's been a client of mine, and I'm a client of hers. And Nancy is a psychologist. She specialises in opening sales conversations that convert prospects into clients. And she's the owner of Rapport Builderz. And Nancy, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Nina, it's exciting to be with you and to be with your audience. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you are very, very welcome. Nancy, we love talking about mindset, you and I, and you've done a lot of work on your mindset and you've got a very successful business. And I'd love for you to share the secrets of your success, the secrets of your inner game with our audience. And as you're a sales specialist as well, I know that our listeners, they're having sales conversations, they're talking to prospects, they have, various maybe blocks around sales conversations. So it'd be really great to focus on the mindset of how to have a great sales call where you're serving your prospect. And hopefully at the end of the call, they want to become your client. So let's start with a little bit about your background and how you come to be doing what you're doing now.
So, Nina, I think I was born a psychologist. I did not have the word for it at the time when I was a child, but I happened to be the youngest child and the only girl in a family of boys where culturally there was a lot of emphasis on being male. So here I was, a female and the last child and so forth. My parents had a very stormy relationship. And as a result, I got to practice psychology, like I say, as a child. It wasn't until I went to college and took an introduction to psychology course that I realized, I've been studying human behavior forever, and it fascinates me. So that's a little bit about kind of how I got started.
And how did you get into helping clients to have sales conversations?
That's a great question because I did not want to sell as a young person. I thought sales was manipulative. That used car salesman came into mind as a stereotype, the person who basically persuaded you or manipulated you into doing something you didn't want to do. However, when I graduated and I took time in between my degrees, so I got an undergraduate degree in psychology, then I went on and got a master's, later got a doctorate. And in between, I found myself with a position in which I was selling mental health services in the workplace. And I believed in mental health services, but I did not really know how to sell other than that stereotype model. So I went back to school, but not to an actual college or university. I went to my public library. And I'm very grateful that the library is filled with resources that enabled me to learn all about I got introduced to many of the major sales gurus, but the one that spoke to me the most was a book by Tony Alessandro called The Platinum Rule. Now, I'm sure that people are familiar with the Golden Rule. If you're a Christian person, the Golden Rule is to treat others the way I want to be treated. The Platinum Rule shifts it ever so slightly, but importantly, treat others the way they want to be treated. And that perspective of putting myself into the framework, into the mindset, the shoes, looking through the lens of the prospect, that's what kind of shifted my ability to sell authentically, which I know you'll ask about at some point. But it's all about coming from a place of authenticity rather than a place of manipulation.
Yes, it's all about serving, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, that sounds absolutely fascinating, and I will look up that book. I really like the idea of that. What are the biggest obstacles for business owners to sell their services? Because they're not just selling their services, they're selling themselves. And it's sometimes easy to sell someone else's product or service than it is to sell our own. So what are the main obstacles that you keep coming across?
So As you know, Nina, there are really four personality styles. This comes from Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine. He identified four temperaments, and he actually treated people medically based upon their particular style. Well, later research showed that there's a psychological component, not just a physiological component. And so when you say that, what's the biggest obstacle? Each of the four styles has an obstacle. So for the person who is perhaps more along the lines of our style, that obstacle tends to take the form of taking things personally, feeling rejected. And as you say, we're selling ourselves. So we assume that when the buyer says no, it's somehow we're flawed, we're defective, something's wrong with us, as opposed to the buyer has his or her own reasons, his or her own values and priorities. And no is not a personal negative message to us, but simply a no, this doesn't fit into my values.
So it's not taking it personally.
That is one of the major problems. People take it personally. I will tell you that there's another sales style that is very logical, and they buy based upon information. Hence, when they sell or they're in a position to influence others, they lay out all this information. In fact, some of us on the receiving end feel like they just vomit on us all this information. And they needed the information to make a decision. But we get glassy-eyed and like overwhelmed and can't. And so this is the person whose actual challenge is to ask for the sale. They don't ask. It's so logical, the person should just say yes. In fact, it's very interesting. I was just a moment ago on social media reading somebody's request for help, and it was exactly along that line. You know, it was so logical. She put out all the information, but she doesn't want to be pushy and aggressive, because for her, anytime somebody asks, she feels pushed. So she responds in turn. She projects by saying, nope, I am not going to ask.
So that type of style of person don't ask for the sale.
They fail to ask for the sale. Yeah, exactly.
And what are the fears associated with selling? There's fears of criticism, rejection.
Oh, of course. All of those are very typical fears. And, you know, the other day I decided to look up the acronym. I mean, you probably heard that fear is an acronym, false evidence appearing real. Well, it turns out there are like 80 different acronyms for FEAR. But for me, I think the most important is to recognize that many of our fears, they're like 2 or 3 inborn fears in the human being. The fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. All the other fears, Nina, are learned and made up.
Made up in our childhood mainly, and learned in our childhood.
They are stories that we made up, and now we have found evidence to, you know, somehow affirm that that's so. We act on it, and when we act on it, it actually creates the very thing that we have projected, and it goes on and on and on.
And then we believe our stories, we act as if they're true, we keep looking for more evidence that they're true, and so on and so forth. And this is what I call these stories, I call them limiting beliefs. They have many different names, but these are the stories that have to be proved to be lies before many people can move forward.
Yes. Yes. And interestingly enough, because, like you said, they started off innocently as an explanation for some circumstance. And they may have been reinforced, as you said, by our parents, our family members, maybe society, you know, the school system, whatever. But they then morphed into that thought to becoming, like you say, a belief, because a belief is we hold that to be true. And now, once you believe it's true, you find corroborating evidence. You find, events in your life that say, yeah, this is true.
And what about your own personal journey of your inner game?
Well, my inner game has taken quite a number of decades to evolve. I did not have an awareness that my stories were stories because I held them as beliefs. And I lived it out. And they were limiting beliefs, as you said. They were keeping me from being as successful as I could be. So I have done many things to shift around and let go of and tell a new story. First of all, you have to recognize it's a story. And that takes tremendous openness to even entertain the fact that what I think is true might not be. So somehow there has to be enough discontent, enough pain that the individual is willing to entertain. Well, maybe there's a better way, a different way. And when you open your mind to that, guess what? It will come. And so for me, I did affirmations. I, of course, read a lot of motivational books. I sought out therapists of various sorts. I got involved in a 12-step recovery program. And that was very helpful too, because part of that program is to undertake an inventory and take a fearless moral look at oneself and behavior, and then to share it with another human being. And all of those things, began to shift and change what I thought were firm beliefs. And they began to make them a little bit more malleable, permeable, so that I was willing to, again, keep exploring. And you were a very important part of that journey, because I still had these notions that were holding me stuck. And I think the reason we worked so well together is because I had already come to a place where I was very open to look at my stories. And you had a particular technique. Those of you who are not familiar with it, it's an amazing technique that helps you get at the story and helps you rid it once and for all.
And it's gone permanently, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And this is what I found to be true for myself as well. We talked about sometimes business owners not feeling that they can ask for the sale. And there are lots of mental talk going on when a prospect is on the phone. So we have all sorts of stories going on. I don't have anything of value. They can't afford me. They won't be willing to pay the price. I'm worried about saying my price. I can't build rapport. What do they think about me? There's lots of mental talk going on before we even get on the phone. How can our listeners overcome these mental obstacles?
So here's a very important piece of advice that I would offer. And it's one that I used to teach at the college level, and I would teach students my class. I taught them public speaking skills. And according to certain research, public speaking, or the fear of speaking in public, is actually the number one fear. It exceeds the fear of death. Which is, I know. And some people say dying on stage is really what it's all about. But at any rate, I would tell my students that the fear of public speaking is really being self-conscious. It's about, like you said, what are they going to think of me? Are they judging my appearance? Are they judging my ability to speak? Are they judging my content? I mean, there's so much but it's all about me. What do they think of me, 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 me? Well, isn't that what the golden rule was about? Treat others the way I want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat them the way they want to be treated. Well, your audience wants you to deliver an amazing message. Guess what? That prospect on the phone, or if you're in person, wants you to solve their genuine pain and problem. They want you to succeed at the job of selling them. It's a whole different perspective when you stop thinking about yourself and you stop putting the focus on you, and the focus is on the other and genuinely serving the other. When you frame it from that perspective, a lot of the anxiety goes away. I would recommend that for people who are struggling with those kinds of self-limiting beliefs, that they truly think about what is it that I can do for the other person. And it isn't that I can sell them my product, but genuinely listening to them. And I'll give a good example because it happened just yesterday within the last 24 hours. I had a conversation with a potential client. We had met each other the previous evening at a networking event. And when I introduced myself through my elevator speech, she immediately said, this person may have something for me. We had a conversation. And again, it was like, it wasn't about what I could sell her. It was about listening to her. And as I listened to her, it was mindset. So Nina, my whole time as I'm speaking with her, I'm thinking, I know someone who can help you. I know someone who can help you because you have limiting beliefs that are getting in the way. So it wasn't about me. It was about serving her.
So what we're saying is for to have successful business conversations with a prospect, you really need to clear the gunk out of your own mind first. So you're very clear, you're aligned. As you said, the focus is on the prospect, it's not on you. And that helps you to build very natural rapport. It helps you to be very genuine, very authentic, and to really, really listen. And I know that since I've done my own inner work, the conversations I have are a completely different quality than the conversations I used to have before. And my whole feelings and thinking about having sales conversations has completely changed. And actually, they're not sales conversations, they're service conversations. How can we serve the other person? And that has made the whole process so much more enjoyable. So it's a real shift in your way of thinking about these conversations, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And again, take the emphasis off yourself and what you can get, and instead really listen. You know, they say we have two ears and one mouth, and they should be used in that proportion. And it's listening to that individual, not because I am the answer, but because at this moment in time, I can guide them to the answer. Clearly they've been brought into my life energetically and vice versa, because we have something to give and teach each other.
Yes, absolutely. There are no coincidences, are there?
No.
What about our listeners who are worried about getting a no? And that can stop them from even having the conversation or for asking for the sale.
Again, it's because we're so invested in the outcome as opposed to being invested in how can I serve, what can I do? Here I am, I've been brought to this moment to be with you, or even right now for whoever's listening. You're hearing this message because you need to hear this message. I've been given the resources to deliver the message, but what you do with it, the outcome is up to you. And when I cut off and I detach from the outcome, because I think the perfect outcome is you're going to hire me. Well, the perfect outcome is that I can be that conduit that can refer you to the next resource. I don't know what the perfect outcome is. And when I let go and I let the universe, I get so much better results. So not asking, being afraid of no, it's because I'm invested with that outcome.
Yes, and there's if you can bring an attitude of curiosity to the conversation, I think that's a great mindset to be in.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because, again, we forget that. We're listening to another human being. What a gift. Money comes, money goes. It can be replaced, but the time that we have on earth can never be replaced. So this moment that you and I right now, Nina, are spending talking to each other is precious, valuable beyond belief. And if the listener is here, you're investing your time right now. It's the most precious gift you can give to another human being. So when you're there in their presence, be in their presence.
It is a great opportunity, isn't it, to have a conversation, whatever the outcome of the conversation is.
That's right.
What technical help, if you like, for want of a better word, in terms of, sales training, when our listeners are actually in a call, what are the important things to remember in terms of the flow of the conversation? Because there's certain bridging points in a sales conversation, aren't there? Asking the client about their pain points, asking them about what they want, then you're telling them about your service. So certain bridges, aren't there, that you're building to keep the flow going and to keep it authentic and real?
Well, you just outlined very easily, three important pieces in that conversation. Obviously, there's a beginning where you're trying to establish rapport and feel comfortable with one another so that the other individual can open up and share whatever's going on. Then you need to take a deep, deep, deep dive into their pain. For some people, that may be hard to do because when you hear somebody else who's struggling and in pain, our natural tendency is to want to fix it or maybe just even avoid it, not even, but for those of us who choose to be in a business where we're helping others, then we need to learn to listen to that pain and actually go deeper into it and maybe even squeeze it a little bit to make sure we understand it thoroughly, what that pain is, so that the other individual is also aware that that pain is sufficient enough motivation for me to take action, because motivation has to come from within. It's not something we can give them. So that is, like you say, the first part of the conversation. And then you also want to explore, well, if that pain were eliminated, what would life be like? And this is the world of the future, the wonderful world of the future. And, it's great to help your client understand what they have to gain as a result of taking a step to get out of whatever the situation is. And then you do need to shift it and say, based upon what you're telling me, and summarize what I've heard, here's how I think what I have to offer matches up and can help. So there are those distinct pieces of the sales conversation.
That's great advice. I really love that. And what's your top mindset tip you can share with anyone who's going to be having a strategy call, a call for someone to find out more about how they work in their services?
So what immediately comes to mind is back to story. My story and their story. My story about whether or not I'm good, bad, or indifferent, I have to not project my story onto them. But then secondly, their story. You see, they're going to have a story why they can't or don't or won't. Well, you need to recognize it's their story. Again, it is not a truth. And one of the biggest stories that we get sucked into is, I don't have the money, I don't have the resources. But when somebody genuinely is in a lot of pain and they know that there are no other alternatives, they will find a way to solve their problem. And if it's a financial investment, they borrow, they whatever it is that they do in order to solve it. So that's probably one of the biggest stories that we buy into, is our client's story about their limitations.
Yes, and that's a really, really big one. Mm-hmm. Because it's so easy to feel sorry for that person as well and think, actually, I can't offer my full service because they can't afford it. And therefore, I can't help them, but actually they do need some help in order to move forward.
So again, I mentioned the gal that I happened to speak with yesterday. And as she's talking to me, she's telling me how she's struggling in her business, how she's doing temp work in order to support herself. And she's got children to raise and so forth. And I could easily have been sucked into thinking this woman has no resources. She can't afford me. And as we continue to talk, out in the conversation comes the fact that her father's family is extremely wealthy. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if she's on good terms. I did ask her about that relationship because it was appropriate in context of what we were discussing, but there are resources that people have access to when they really feel pressed to act.
That's a great story to share. And also our own value is a big part of that conversation that we're having with the prospect, is our belief or our non-belief in our own value. And that can really play a big part, can't it?
Yes, it can. So, as you're exploring this area, Nina, I would really urge people who are listening. If you're listening, there's a good chance you're looking for some help, a third-party resource. We can't find all the answers inside as much as we'd like to, but sometimes we need that outside person that can bring up the wisdom that is within and reinforce that positive inner voice that's telling us, yes, we can. Each of us is talented. We have amazing gifts. We were put on this planet, for a purpose to help and serve one another. You and your experiences need to be shared. And no matter how far down you've gone, that is even probably more of a reason why you have something to offer somebody else, because here you are, you have survived, and you, I hope, are thriving.
Yes, you made lots of great learnings, which you can now share with other people and help them in their lives.
So true.
So true. Nancy, how can our listeners find out more about you and your work?
So I'd recommend they go to my website, which is Rapport Builderz, and I'm going to spell that. Rapport is Rapport, Builderz, Builder, and the last letter is Z, not S, Z for Zare. So rapportbuilders.com. And you can either write me, Nancy, at Rapport Builderz, or learn more at Rapport Builderz. And one of my staff or myself will be sure to answer your questions and be supportive.
Fantastic. And your work is wonderful. It's brilliant. It's a great insight into personalities, how they think, the words that they use. And it's a huge help in really understanding people, not just in a selling conversation, but just in life and building relationships.
Yeah, it's nice that you said that, Nina, because my clients consistently tell me that the best benefits they get from our work together, yes, they get sales and they learn how to convert prospects into clients, but they learn even more so how to get along with their partners, their children, their family members, significant others. Those things are, that's what makes our life so special, is those relationships.
Yes, they're priceless, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for being here today. It's such an incredible subject, sales and having conversations with prospects, and it's something I would love to dig into again with you another time. But thank you so much for your time today. And for everyone who's been watching and listening in, I hope you've had a ton of great value from this call. And please do join me again next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.